Welcome to the Prophecy Club. Our topic today is interesting. Secret American technology, silver, about to skyrocket, Mexico, Venezuela, and Iran. Okay, let's start with the secret technology. My guess is you probably haven't heard about this. I don't think this is going to be on the mainstream news. Okay, covert intel. Americans have technology that incapacitated hundreds within seconds. So the guy says 20 men with superior, this is one of the Maduro bodyguards, 20 men with superior technology disabled radars, downed drones, killed hundreds unharmed. They fired what seemed like 300 rounds a minute, used a sonic weapon, caused instant bleeding and incapacitation, instant bloody nose, bloody vomiting from dozens of security men hit by a single pulse. A little bit more detail is, this account of the U.S. raid to capture Nicolas Maduro provided a Venezuelan security guard loyal to Maduro is an absolutely chilling testimony. And it explains how a lot of why the tone across Latin America all of a sudden changed. In other words, nobody wants to fight Trump in America anymore. Security guard. On the day of the operation, we didn't hear anything. We were on guard, but suddenly all of our radar systems just shut down without explanation. The next thing we knew were drones. Lots of drones flying over positions, but we didn't know what to do. After those drones appeared, some helicopters arrived, but there were very few. I think barely 8 helicopters. From those helicopters, soldiers came down, maybe 20 of them. But those men were technologically very advanced. They didn't look like anything we fought against before. Yes, but it was a massacre. We were hundreds, but we had no chance. They were shooting with such precision and speed, it seemed like each soldier was firing 300 rounds per minute. We couldn't do anything. And your weapons, didn't they help? No, not at all. Because it wasn't just weapons. At one point, they launched something. I don't know what it was. It was like a very intense sound wave. Suddenly, it felt like my head was exploding from inside. We all started bleeding from the nose. Some were vomiting blood. We fell to the ground, unable to move. So try to imagine men, military men, on the ground, fetal positions, blood coming out of their mouth and their nose, and they can't do anything. No, not at all. Those 20 men, without a single casualty, killed hundreds of us. We had no way to compete with their technology, their weapons. I swear I've never seen anything like it. We couldn't even stand up after that sonic weapon or whatever it was. I'm sending warning to anyone who thinks that they can fight against the United States. They have no idea what they're capable of. After what I saw, I never want to be on the other side of that again. They're not going to be messed with. And now that Trump has said Mexico's on the list, do you think the situation will change in Latin America? Definitely. Everyone is already talking about this. No one wants to go through what we went through. Now, everybody thinks twice. What happened here is going to change a lot of things, not just in Venezuela, but throughout the region, maybe throughout the world. Now, I'm not going to read all of this, but this is a confirmation. You can pause and read it if you want to. And I cut out several pages because that's not the point. We're not talking about the mark of the beast today. But this is from Brendan Biggs. And he's talking about how he saw that people were being chased by people in Hummers. I'm going to skip that part of the story. But let's get to this. He said they actually exist. They actually have these, he says. And it set out a pulse and knocked the people that were running from them, they didn't want to take the mark of the beast, so the people were running, knocked the people out unconscious for a couple of minutes. They just pointed the thing in the direction of a person or a group and knocked them out unconscious. There was no running away. Now, he says that they still have prototypes. He says they still exist. Again, you can pause and read all of it if you want to. But let's move on to Iran. Now, the point is, this ties together with Iran. Ayatollah Khamenei killed in Iran. Now, he says this is uncorroborated. It is a rumor. And this was the 9th, and I have no further confirmations. And since the fighting is going on, I'll tell you right quick, I question whether, to me, if he is killed or if he had just left Iran, to me, the fighting would be calming down, and apparently it's not. So just to let you know, this probably is not accurate, but I'm passing it on. Also, with what we're talking about today, if you have any wealth that you don't want to lose, my advice is prophecyclubgold.com, 800-200-GOLD, 800-200-GOLD, especially if you have an IRA or 401k. But let's talk about silver because it's still big in the news. Okay. Headline: Silver opens in Shanghai at 92.04 per ounce. After some people are calling a default in delivery of 64 tons of silver on January the 9th, the physical silver metal trading in Shanghai opened with a gap up. Now, look at the red square. That's the gap up. In other words, the price of silver skyrocketed for this one particular moment. The question is whether it's going to skyrocket like Shane Warren was told way back in 2010. Anyway, let's go on. So the physical silver metal trading in Shanghai opened with a gap up to U.S. equivalent of 92.04 per ounce. According to an unconfirmed AI source, a buyer stood for delivery of 64 tons of silver. All right, now, what is a ton? You know those 4x4 pallets that they stack things on to run a forklift under it? Well, normally a pallet load is 4 foot by 4 foot by 4 foot, a cube. But a ton of silver is about half of that. It's about 4 foot by 4 foot by 2 foot. At least that's the same thing for gold. So I assume silver is kind of in the same ballpark, though gold weighs more than silver. But that's a good guess, least way to think of it. So a buyer stood delivery for 64 tons of silver from Shanghai on January the 9th. But for some reason, the source claims that the Shanghai sellers could only come up with 1 ton. One out of the ordered 64. It appears the government of China is grabbing physical silver for its use in military-industrial complex in preparation for a major war. Now, if you ask China, I think right now their number one target would probably be America, but they know they can't do it right now. But let's go on. So he says now, tonight, this is January 11th, at about 10 p.m., markets opened in Asia and silver gapped up to 92.4 or 92.04 per ounce. This sudden gap up of silver, let me skip on down, it says it cannot go any higher because, well, maybe I should, let me read the whole paragraph. This is mathematically unsustainable. This cannot go on, not because any of us insist that it stop. Government doesn't listen to us at all. It cannot go on because there's simply not enough money in existence to continue in this situation. The federal government has no choice but to collapse under the weight of its own debt. It is unavoidable. It is already being called a debt crisis. Now, you remember, Shane Warren was told that the dollar is going to be worthless as leaves blowing in the wind. He also said about that same time there's an earthquake. He also said that people would be protesting, we give us our entitlements. Now, we haven't seen the entitlements yet. We suspected it might be the 43 days of the shutdown, but that doesn't fit with the dollar blowing worthless as leaves. So this could be the beginning of the fulfillment of that vision. Let's go on. Now, this guy apparently has emerged to be someone that a lot of people are listening to lately. So he says, the event that the mainstream financial media told you was impossible, the event that the bullion banks swore could never occurred, just occurred. And it happened while you were sleeping. It happened while the Western world was distracted by the headlines about Iran. It happened on Thursday night, January the 9th, 2026. The Shanghai Gold Exchange failed to deliver physical silver. Not failed in the sense of a small delay, not failed in the sense of a technical glitch. Failed in the sense that 98.5% of the metal that was ordered simply did not exist. Or did it? Failed in the sense that the vault doors opened and there was nothing inside. Failed in the sense that the paper promises were exposed as lies. Let me give you the numbers because the numbers don't lie. Politicians lie, bankers lie, media lies, but mathematics is truth. On Thursday, January the 9th, the Shanghai Gold Exchange delivered delivery request for 64 tons of physical silver. In other words, we want the silver bricks, okay? 64 tons. That's not a small amount, but it's also not extraordinarily large for the world's largest physical exchange. In a functioning market, that request should have been filled without breaking a sweat. Do you know how much silver was actually delivered? 1 ton. 1 ton out of 64 tons ordered. That is a failure rate of 98.44%. Let me say that differently so it sinks in. For every 100 ounces of silver ordered, they received 1.56 ounces. In other words, big problem. Now, what's going on? He says if Shanghai, with all of China's refining capacity, with all of China's domestic production, cannot deliver 64 tons, if they can only scrape together 1 ton, what makes you think the COMEX, meaning New York, can deliver it when the squeeze hits New York? The answer is they can't. And deep down, they know they can't. Okay, so let's talk about what this delivery failure actually means. For decades, the global silver market has operated on a lie. The lie is this: paper silver and physical silver are the same thing. Well, you could buy a futures contract in New York for $75 an ounce, or you could buy a physical bar in Shanghai for $75 an ounce, same thing. The market assumed that these were equivalent if they never diverged. Arbitrage traders would simply step in and close the gap. But on January 1st, 2026, China implemented the, here it is, export licensing system. That system made it nearly impossible to move silver out of China. What's going on? Something big. The arbitrage bridge was blown up. The two markets started to drift apart. By late December, Shanghai was trading at $89, while New York was at $75. Now remember, Shanghai is physical, New York is paper. A $14 spread, we said, I read about this a couple of days ago. $14 spread, we said the spread was unsustainable. We said something had to break. Well, it did break. And what broke was the physical market in China. Why did it break? Because of what we call the war economy drain. Oh, this is important. This is interesting. You see, the reason Shanghai couldn't deliver the 64 tons isn't because China ran out of the silver. China is the world's largest refiner. They process more silver than any other nation on earth. So where did the metal go? It went into the vaults of the Chinese military and the Chinese government, because we are now living in the early stages of a global resource war. And silver is not just a precious metal, it is a strategic war material. Let me connect the dots for you, because the mainstream media is reporting these stories as separate events, but they are all part of the same picture. Story number 1, Iran. As of this weekend, the protests in Iran have escalated to the point where the government has shut down the internet in multiple cities. There are reports of violent clashes in Tehran. Well, Hal Turner says it's over 2,000 dead bodies in Iran. President Trump has issued statements suggesting that the United States is considering intervention options if the Iranian regime collapses into chaos, which appears to be happening. The geopolitical analysts are openly discussing the possibility of a military confrontation in the Persian Gulf within the next 30 to 60 days. It'll probably happen sooner than that, my guess. Story number 2. Then we have Venezuela. The United States government has announced that it is moving to unlock and liquidate between 30 to 50 million barrels of Venezuelan crude oil. They have been held back in a strategic reserve or under sanctions-related seizures. The official story is that this oil will be sold on the open market to stabilize prices. But the real story is that the U.S. government needs cash. They need funding. Funding for what? Funding for the war machine. Now, let me ask you a question. He says, what does a modern military need to function? It needs steel, oil, lithium batteries, and silver. Silver is in every missile guidance system, advanced electronics package or fighter jet, naval destroyer, missile defense system, targeting tracking systems. In other words, there is no military without silver. When nations prepare for war, they hoard the metals that they need to build weapons. And right now, both the United States and China are hoarding silver. There is the truth. That's what's really going on. Not that we run out of silver, it's that we've run out of enough silver for the demand. What does that mean? Supply and demand says the price can be going up. Now, again, I'm not a financial advisor. I'm a prophecy teacher, okay? I'm trying to say, this is the whole point. I'm trying to say that I think Shane Warren was hearing from God when he was told in an audible voice that said silver is going to skyrocket far more than gold. Now, am I telling you to buy gold and silver? I can't do that. I don't even know if you have any money. But I can tell you, if I had some extra money, I think I'd probably be putting it in. If my mom were to call, son, where do you think I got some money? What do you think? I probably would say, Mom, I think right now a very smart place to put it would be silver. So he goes on, so when nations prepare for war, they hoard the metals that they need to build weapons. And right now, both the United States and China are hoarding silver. That's why it's disappearing from the exchanges. That makes sense, doesn't it? That's why Shanghai couldn't deliver the 64 tons. The metal isn't sitting in a warehouse waiting for speculators. It's sitting in a military depot in Jiangsu province or in a defense contractor's vault in Nevada. He says, this is what I call stage 4 of empire collapse. Now he explains the 4 stages. I think it's interesting. Stage 1, financialization. In other words, these are the 4 stages of the fall of a nation or the fall of America. Financialization, what's that? The economy shifts from making things to trading paper. Well, I would say in our case, we shipped all of our jobs and everything to be made over to overseas someplace. Stage 2 is debt accumulation. The government borrows to maintain the illusion of prosperity. Well, if you go read Leviticus 26 and Deuteronomy 28, it says that if you're a righteous nation, you will lend and not borrow. If you're not a righteous nation, you're going to borrow and not lend. And there's more to it. Anyway, stage 3 is currency debasement. The central bank prints money to service the debt. We hit that a long time ago. Stage 4 is a war economy. The nation shifts all resources toward military dominance in a desperate attempt to preserve global power, and we're in stage 4 right now. In stage 4, commodities disappear from civilian markets because the government needs them for military purposes. Does all that make sense? Now, further confirmation. I got this. By the way, thank you so much for you guys make the programs. Your emails, thank you so much for sending me emails. But this came in an email just before I was about to record today. I want you to notice it says that silver has risen more than any other thing in the stock market today. 6%. Never done that before. Let's go on. So, if you want to get some cryptocurrency, my suggestion is go to prophecyclubcrypto.com. I did. Typed in my name, phone number. They called me right back and guided me and explained. I don't know much about crypto. Okay, I mean, it's kind of complicated. But that's what these guys do. They can answer your question. prophecyclubcrypto.com. So you're thinking about getting crypto. It doesn't cost anything. I think it's just smart to check it out. May do something someplace else, but you ought to give them a call. Okay. Next topic, making Mexico our enemy. You know, the angel spoke to Dimitri, said, God will raise up then Russia, Cuba, Nicaragua, Central America, Mexico, and 2 of the countries I can't remember will attack them and defeat America in 1 hour. One of them is Mexico. Trump says U.S. to launch land strikes against Mexico drug cartels. Okay, I love Trump. I think he's trying to fix our nation, but I don't think this is the way to do it. I think the way to do it is to outlaw people from putting the junk in their bodies, be it fentanyl or marijuana or heroin, whatever it is. We need to come against the users. We cut off the users and then no one is buying their drugs, then we don't have to go. But that's not what he's doing. Instead, it says United States President Donald Trump has signaled major potential escalating in the U.S. anti-drug operations. He is talking about going in and hitting the drug cartels in Mexico. I think that's the hand of God. No. Let me put it a different way. I'm afraid that that's the hand of God leading us down the path to destruction, stirring up our enemies against us. Venezuela, Cuba, Russia. We seem to be making a lot of other nations angry out there at us. The article says the U.S. began conducting land strikes against drug cartels, particularly in Mexico. I don't think anybody in Mexico is going to be happy about that. Even if they don't like the drug cartels, I don't think they're going to like America coming in hitting anything there. I just don't think we wouldn't like Canada coming in and taking care of, say, Minnesota. Okay, what's going on there? What can you imagine if Mexico says, okay, well, you need some help out with immigrants in Minnesota, Minneapolis. We'll just send some troops up there, or we'll go bomb some houses. See what I'm saying? Speaking in an interview on Fox News, Sean Hannity, Trump said, we've knocked out 97% of the drugs coming in by water, and we're going to start now hitting land with regard to the cartels. It's even worse. According to sources from the War Department, President Trump will order air, sea, and land attacks against the narcotic cartels in the following states of Mexico. Look, Baja California, Tamaulipas, however you said that, Chihuahua, Sinaloa. I mean, Trump, you can't do this. You can't do this. This is not going to work out. Don't do it. Call my phone. I'll tell you, don't do it. Don't do it. It lines up with bad prophecy. On to the next topic. Not only are we making Cuba and Iran and Venezuela and Mexico, but we're making the big boy on the block angry, Russia. Trump greenlines a U.S. bill proposing 500% tariffs on buyers of Russian oil. I remember I used to think, okay, so the prophecies say that Russia is going to grow big and strong and grow very, very angry. What could we do to make the Russians angry? Wow, this is a pretty good thing right here. So Trump has approved a U.S. bill imposing tariffs of 500% on India and China, saying basically you're not going to be buying any more Russian oil. Okay, how would we react if, let's say, your neighbor next door came to your front door and said, we're not going to let you buy any more groceries? Well, that's kind of what we're doing with Russia. Again, I love Trump. I think he's the best president we've ever had. I'm very much for Trump, but I also very much think this is a big mistake. I see him making mistakes that are walking down the path heading to some really bad prophecy fulfillments. China warns USA, if you want war, you'll get war. He says, if you want war, you'll get war. If you want to destroy China, you will be destroyed. China will not fire the first, listen to this. China will not fire the first shot, but China will not allow you to fire the second shot. Them's fighting words. I'll read it again. If you want war, you'll get war. If you want to destroy China, you will be destroyed because China will not fire the first shot, but, read that again. China will not fire the first shot, but China will not allow you to fire the second shot. Whoa. Then they go on with some more big threats. China's new DF-61 ICBM claiming it contains 60 nuclear warheads plus one hydrogen bomb. He said it can reach anywhere on the planet in about 20 minutes. What he's saying is we've got hypersonic weapons and you don't, America. We've got one missile that can destroy 60 cities and we can take out any place on the planet in 20 minutes. Now, is he bluffing? I don't think so. That's the kind of remarks you don't make if you want to live. They saw what we did to Venezuela, but they also saw what we did with Afghanistan. They saw how we left. They've seen our mistakes. They've seen us. I think that Trump, if you'll call me, I'll tell you, you should probably humble yourself a little bit. You don't want to stir up these other countries around us. Let's go on. Internal revolution. And you knew I wouldn't get far not talking about this. Now, this sounds real bad, but you got to understand what it's saying. GOP lawmakers invoke insurrection. Let me try it again. GOP lawmakers invoke Insurrection Act, arrest Tim Walz for threatening to use National Guard against ICE. Now, what it sounds like is it's already taken place. That's not what has happened. It's saying GOP lawmakers suggest, but it left the suggest word out, suggest that Trump invokes the Insurrection Act, then would allow him to pretty much do what he wants to do with Tim Walz and all these other protesters. But if he starts coming against the protesters, isn't that what Iran is doing? Isn't that what we're going to hear from Iran? They're going to say, wait a minute, you're having trouble with your people, we're having trouble with our people. Back off, America. Republican lawmakers are urging President Donald Trump to invoke the Federal Insurrection Act to arrest Governor Tim Walz after the Democrat threatened to use Minnesota's National Guard to thwart immigration enforcement in his state. Request for Trump to invoke the law, which gives a presidential power to arrest suspects obstructing federal law enforcement, and a whole lot more. I think that would be a real big mistake right now. I have orders to prepare the Minnesota National Guard. This is Walz. We have soldiers in training prepared to be deployed if necessary. I remind you, a warning order is in the heads up for our folks. And these National Guard troops are our National Guard troops. I've issued a warning to prepare the Minnesota National Guard. Would you say that that is something that could cause an internal revolution? Okay, so ICE says they're not leaving Minnesota. So, for whatever reason, maybe no reason, Walz calls up the Minnesota National Guard. Do you think Trump's going to say, oh, okay, we'll pull out? No, I don't think Trump is going to back up a half a step. So what does he do? It makes any difference whether it's his National Guard, other National Guards, the military, whatever, but he's not going to back down. So we would send enough people in there, just like right now they're sending 100 more ICE officers into Minnesota. So if Trump pulls up the National Guard, whatever it takes, Trump's going to send more. Well, that could start an internal revolution. I mean, right now, we've already had blood on blood. American blood killing American blood. We could see the internal revolution start any day. I'm needing $12,000 to print this book. I think that this is one of the two books, along with Secret Door, that is going to fill the sports stadiums. I've told you many times. June 27th of 2008, I heard the Lord say, Stan, when those prophecies I gave your wife begin to come to pass, people from all directions will begin to turn and listen to your ministry. Those prophecies are in this book. And when they start coming to pass, this book, Secret Door, the other books are going to start flying off the shelves. A lot of people are going to get them. Matter of fact, this one is going to be the first book that Prophecy Club has ever actually published. So I think it's going to go to a lot of people. So we need to get it printed. And right now I'm expecting to have the completed copy to me today. And I'm expecting, well, let's put it this way, this week to get it off to the printers. And then about the first week or so in January, be able to start shipping it out. But I need $12,000 to print it. So if God has blessed you, you can help. Please help us.